All right. Hello, everybody. We are live. Thank you for being here. It is Sunday, March 1st. Welcome to March. We are officially into the third month of the year. Quite a way to start the month. We've got quite a bit to talk about. Obviously, for those that have kept up with the news over the weekend, the United States has officially struck Iran. And although it's not literally classified as a war, it definitely feels like we are in a war. We have been analyzing this really for the past 3 weeks now, this idea of if we're going to strike or not. We've had a lot of conflicting news. We had diplomacy, then we had not diplomacy, then you had quotes coming from senior officials saying we're going to strike, we're not going to strike. Around Friday night, which was early Saturday morning, this was around 12 a.m. Saturday morning, we struck. And as a result, we have now fundamentally changed the geopolitical order of what's going on or what could be going on across the entire world. Obviously, the futures are red based on this. Got futures right here down about 1%. It's not as bad as I thought it would be. It was signaling to be a lot worse. And so right now, if we're only down 1%, that's every other day, quite frankly, with the stock market. So that's not too crazy. Oil prices are up about 8%. We got a lot to talk about oil today, so we will get into that as well. They were up about 17% at the very open of futures. So they have come down a significant amount, which is good to see, a little bit of stabilization. But nonetheless, you've got oil that is having its best day in almost 3 years. And then you got gold and silver that are also getting a pump given the geopolitical instability. Gold right there up 2.5%. It was almost at 5,400. Now it's down. Silver is almost at 96. Now it's at 94.99. So those two also not as bad as they were at the very open. Bitcoin as well. This one dumped to 62 right when the strike was announced, which again, a lot of people were probably asleep. I didn't sleep. Bitcoin right here at 66. I didn't sleep until like 4 a.m. on Saturday because, I was monitoring the situation. There are a lot of memes over the weekend. The monitoring the situation meme is the best meme ever. Because literally, there's nothing I can do about it. But I'm over here, got 7 screens opening, monitoring the situation, even though I can't do anything about it. So yes, I was spending all night monitoring how things went. But I think a lot of people woke up to the news of the fact that we did strike. And I was up, I saw the announcement, and then I was just watching the news all night, trying to figure out how this played out. A lot of things to talk about, a lot of stuff to get into. Perspectives on this, I think are many and diverse, and we'll try to view a lot of different perspectives. I personally have my own thoughts and opinions, but I want to give as many different perspectives as possible from a not only geopolitical perspective, which eventually feeds into the stock market, but also what this means for the broader, state of hegemonic powers across the entire world. I mean, the United States taking this action, it's not a joke. And this is what once the futures or once the overnight markets open at 8, we'll go through the prices, and then after that, we'll start all the coverage. But this part of Trump's statement, which came out at around 2 a.m. on Saturday, I could not believe what I was like. I literally could not believe this is what I was listening to. For those that haven't seen it, here's part of the clip. But it's real. We are officially going for regime change in Iran.
Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach.
I could not believe what I was hearing. And the reason I could not believe what I was hearing, and we'll start exploring a lot of different perspectives after the overnight markets open and we get through all the prices. Hopefully, the futures only being down 1% means we don't see too much red. I mean, that was Trump saying, all right, boom, it's happening. we are going for regime change. We are going to liberate you, whether you believe it or not. This is what he's saying. And we're going to give you the chance that you've been asking for generations, for 47 years to be exact. And now it's time. Let's see what you can do. Let's see if we take out the people that have been oppressing you, the people that have killed tens of thousands of protesters as you guys have been trying to fight for your freedom. If we get rid of them, which he did, the supreme leader was killed on the first day of the strikes. You guys have a shot at freedom. And that to me, you know, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, there are perspectives from the human side of, hey, I live in the Western world. I'm free. I want other people to experience that freedom. So if this is what needs to be done, then that is a good thing for theoretically people to be free. Then there's the other legacy of what freedom entails for America. And, you know, if you've lived a little bit, you've also been able to study a bit of history. 2003, it was in the name of freedom as well, going into Iraq, and didn't necessarily create freedom. Created a power vacuum. We tried to change the regime when we got rid of Hussein, didn't actually change the regime. And then we ended up leaving with nothing really to show for it, but we spent $10 trillion. And what did we really get out of that? So I think there's two very, very conflicting perspectives right here around, hey, like, wow, I want other people to be liberated. I want other people to be free. As an American, I want everyone to experience the freedom that we have. But then again, I know that this route of trying to achieve that freedom also is not historically necessarily played out. The other perspective that made this even more complicated is the Iranian people. I mean, there's two different perspectives. Some, you know, pledge loyalties to the supreme leader, and you know, they are devastatingly sad. They don't want this to happen. Other people are like, thank God, finally, we got rid of him, right? And so I don't have that many Iranian friends. I have about three, two that I'm close with, one that actually lives in Oman. And I was talking to her over the weekend, and she was like, yeah, this is what we've been waiting for. And she's not a fan of Trump. I'll say that. She does not like Trump. But and I think that's something that a lot of people recognize over the weekend. A lot of Iranians who you could say are Democrats that are not a fan of Trump, they definitely don't like the supreme leader a bit more than they don't like Trump. Farzad, who is likely going to be on the channel tomorrow, Farzad's a good friend as well. And his parents actually left Iran in 1979. He ended up being born in Spain, but they left during the revolution. You know, he's been tweeting all over the weekend. I actually got to talk to him over the weekend as well. Hopefully he'll be able to join the market open tomorrow. That this is the greatest thing ever, that this is what people have been waiting for, that it is finally right to go for this opportunity and get the job done and to liberate Iran. And the question simply then becomes, well, what's next? Which is always the question after this happens. I think everyone can objectively agree, okay, this guy was not the best guy in the world, and some type of operation was necessary in order for things to move forward. But how do we move forward? And if we don't have a plan to move forward, did it justify the operation of doing, you know, what Trump set out to do over the weekend? And I think that is also very, very confusing. There's plenty of videos all over the weekend of just people being super happy about this, partying, saying, I love Donald Trump. There were sort of not protests, but like celebrations in the streets of Toronto and all these different places from different Iranians that live there, Persians that live there, being so happy about this. And so realistically, every single Iranian or Persian that I've talked to over the weekend was like excited wasn't even the word. They were finally just like, okay, we were waiting years and years and years for something to happen. And now it has happened. And, you know, because a lot of them also don't live in Iran anymore, but they have a lot of family and friends that are still stuck there. And this is the opportunity for them to be, I mean, Farzad went as far as to say it was his mom's birthday on Saturday, and this was the best gift she could have ever got as an Iranian. So you take that perspective, but then you take the broader geopolitical perspective of what does it mean for oil prices? What does it mean for geopolitical instability within the region? What does it mean for Iran that's now bombing Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Bahrain and Dubai, which we've seen all these different proxy bombs that have happened over the weekend? And how does that result in some type of path forward for us as investors that are trying to figure out how to allocate capital? Does this mean you have to be long oil the rest of the year? Does this mean that, you know, we're going to have so much more instability? Trump had a quote saying this is going to last for another 4 weeks. Is it actually going to last for 4 weeks? By the way, regime change. How the hell do you change the regime? Because there's already a new Ayatollah, for those that don't know, that was, I guess, upgraded to the throne and put in place this morning without putting boots on the ground. How do you not put boots on the ground if you're actually going for regime change? And what is so troubling to me about this, and I guess troubling is not the best word, confusing is the right word that I'm looking for. Got 4 minutes until the overnight market's open. Is Trump campaigned on not starting new wars. Everyone knows that. And specifically around Iran, I mean, like days before the election, he said if Kamala wins, she's going to start a war with Iran. We're going to have issues. I'm going to stop that from happening. And so he is so anti-war, so against the process of meddling in the Middle East. He's got midterms coming up. We got the affordability crisis. You got, student loans that are going crazy, the housing prices that need to come down, the 10-year, which finally is getting a little bit of a break, which means, stocks might sell off because you're getting people to start buying bonds, lowest level since April of 2025. Why would he focus on this? And there's there's one of two options. Number one is that the United States has received significant levels of intelligence that Iran is ready, or Iran is capable of not only creating a nuclear weapon, but using a nuclear weapon. And I don't know if that's the case. I don't think any of us know that's the case from the basic level of due diligence I've done. Iran, they're trying to enrich uranium, and they obviously want a nuke, but they are nowhere near, from my understanding, the capacity to actually launch an intercontinental ballistic missile. So maybe he got a lot of intelligence from the administration that said, nope, this is the only opportunity we have to get the job done because they're getting very close. Which, that has not really been communicated to the American people. That has not gone through Congress. At least after 9/11, Bush took all the important steps that was needed to get 90% approval to actually launch a war. This was kind of just unilaterally, hey, we're going to attack them because we think they have a nuke. Or number two, which is, the other argument that's being put out there, is he's compromised. And there's some reason, whatever that reason may be, for why he is going almost out of nowhere to be like, Iran, regime change, boom. I mean, 3 Americans ended up dying today. And Trump's response to this, as he put out a video, was, that's war. It is what it is. And, obviously, yes, that is what it is. A war is horrible, and every war is going to have casualties, and it is something that is sad, but it is a process. The way that he said it also was just like, wow. He's just like, yep, we've accepted. It is what it is. It's going to happen. People are going to die, and that's the price that we have to pay. And so I think just confusion is the big thing that I have about everything that has happened, because it feels like this came out of nowhere. Obviously, it didn't literally come out of nowhere because we've been covering the story for weeks. But the fact that they went this hard, the fact that they're saying we are changing the regime and we're doing it now, it felt like it came out of nowhere.
Grieve for the true American patriots who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation, even as we continue the righteous mission for which they gave their lives. We pray for the full recovery of the wounded and send our immense love and eternal gratitude to the families of the fallen. And sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is. Likely be more, but we'll do everything possible.
I mean, right there, he's acknowledging more people are going to die. That's the way it is. There will likely be more. So for him to come to that conclusion and that acknowledgement means that just because we killed the supreme leader, this is not ending anytime soon. And I think what the markets are going to try to price in over the next few weeks is exactly how long is this going to last? Why exactly this is happening? And what does it mean for the broader equity markets and commodities market? And I guess over time, we're going to find out. Overnight markets, they are open. Let's see what we've got. S&P 500 is down about 0.73, 680.4 is what we have on the S&P. NVIDIA down another 1%. That was to be expected. Tech, I think, is going to hit the worst, 175 on NVIDIA. Let's check Palantir. Palantir is green. There were some pictures that were disclosed by the White House. It is quite obvious that Maven Smart Systems, which is the backbone at this point of the Department of War, is running in the background. So I think Palantir and other defense contractors are actually going to catch a bid on this, because it seems like their software was definitely used to be able to make this happen. NVIDIA is down 1.2%, Block's down 0.5%, CoreWeave down another 3.7%, PayPal down 2%, ASTS down 2%, Rocket Lab down 2.5%, Apple's down 1%, the Qs are down 1%, Amazon down 2%, Meta down 1.3%, Micron down 2%, SoFi it's going below $17. That's down 3.5%. AppLovin's down 3%. Oh, where's Hood? Are we at least holding 72? Hood is at 74. Okay, not as bad as I thought. Palo Alto, that's down 1%. Roblox is down 1%. Uber is down 1.23%. Copex is up 0.5%. Silver, SLV is actually up about 0.5%. Gold is also up about 1% as well. We are seeing tech across the board get hit. Not as bad as I think it could have been, but nonetheless, it is still bad. Rocket Lab, some of the more high beta names getting hit worse. Rocket Lab down 3.4%. Where is Tesla? Tesla is below 400. Tesla's actually getting hit pretty hard. 2.4. 2.4. Palantir, yep, kind of expected it. 143.50. You know, Michael Burry can hate the valuation, but he cannot deny that there's a reason this stock trades at a pretty high premium. He might not love that reason, but that reason's a little bit more important than his Substack. And that reason kind of transcends what a lot of people think. Palantir right there, 142. That's up 3.5%. NVIDIA down 2%, 174.50. NVIDIA losing a lot of momentum. Let's check the oil stocks. Exxon is up 9%. Chevron is probably up 5%. Chevron 7% right there. XLE should also be up. That's the energy ETF. That's up 6%. Now remember, oil spiked, or the energy stocks in particular spiked the day after the Venezuela operation, and then they kind of faded away. So just be careful if you're going to go super long oil. I mean, the day to do that was Friday, quite frankly, as a hedge. Chasing it right now, I'm not saying it can't work. I'm just saying, at the end of the day, it is chasing. So you got to kind of watch out how the oil prices will move. How about the drone stocks? Ondas is not trading overnight. What about Kratos? That got hit. Oh, wow, that's up 10%. Ondas is probably going to open up green. It's not trading on Webull. Kratos up 10%. So drone, defense, Raytheon's probably up. Raytheon is up 11%. Wow. Lockheed Martin is up 13.9%. Yeah, the market is obviously shifting right here into energy, gold, silver, and defense names. And that's kind of what you're seeing across the board. Everything else kind of getting hit. Affirm, that's down. JP Morgan, that's down. Regional banks are down. Iran is down 4.5%. Nebius is down another 4%. Google's down 2%. Dell's down 2%. Netflix, which can't complain at 93, but that one is down 3% as well. You guys saying Ondas is up 6%? Okay, I probably can't see it on Webull, but all the drone stocks are likely moving. How about Northrop Grumman, NOC? That is also up 7%. Drones, defense, and oil seems to be catching the bid right here. Again, Palantir up 4%. That is software and defense, as that's catching the bid. Speaking of software, how about IGV? That is down 1%. Salesforce is down 2%. Adobe is down 1.65%. VG should be getting a bid. Natural gas, it's not trading on Webull. Let me check Robinhood. I would imagine VG and Next catching a bid. VG is up 8% on Hood. 1050. Wow. This thing was at 1015, fell all the way to 960, right back up there. And then Next Decade also doesn't trade on Webull. Let me check on Robinhood. That is up 2.23%. 2.23%. VG again, 1050 overnight. EOSC down again. That one continues to go down. I don't know why SoFi continues to get just clobber, but that's down another 4% right here. MP, that's down 1.9%. SMR, that's down 5%. The nuclear names not really getting the bid. Energy is, but not nuclear energy. Oklo down 3.49%. Rocket Company's down 1.3%. Lunar's down. Intuit's down. Krispy Kreme down 5%. That was actually pumping last week. Duolingo's down 3%. TSM's down 1%. AMD's down 3%. 194 on AMD. Broadcom, which has earnings this week. Unfortunately, if NVIDIA couldn't catch a bid after earnings, I don't know if Broadcom's going to catch a bid. That's down 2% right there. IONQ, Quantum down 5%. HIMS down another 2%. Walmart is up and Coca-Cola is up, because even in a war, I guess we're going to need to drink some Coke. So Coke's catching the bid right there. Your value stocks basically getting a bid along with defense contractors, drone stocks, and energy. Seems like that's what we're seeing. XLE right there up 5.5%. Chevron up 5.8%. Is it confirmed Noto won't get those incentives? Well, I think there's like another. No, I think it's by June, right? I feel like he has another month to get the stock up to 35, then has to stay there for like 2 months. It just feels very unlikely. So, yeah, I mean, realistically, SoFi doubling from here and staying there. I mean, maybe it happens. Maybe March is better. We'll look at some macro data for how March and April goes, but at this point, I think people will be happy if SoFi gets like $20. SoFi right there down at 17. SPY down 0.5%. NVIDIA, wow, NVIDIA recovering. NVIDIA was at 174, now back at 177. Nvidia not getting hit too bad right there. So getting at least a little bit of relief. S&P as well, bit of a green candle. Again, there's low liquidity, so this is just the initial reaction. Bitcoin as well, not getting hit that hard. That's at 66.3. Costco is flat. Honestly, I think it's very hard to predict what's going to happen, like price action wise, given the extent of the damage we've seen and the extent of the damage that might continue. However, historically, whenever there's a war breakout or a strike or something, like the dip lasts for less than a day, maybe a couple of days max. But we've been through this for the past 2 years, many times with Israel. Israel's been involved with 3 or 4 different dips. Remember April of 2024, and then you had June of 2025. They last for a day, and then people buy the dip because things are going to stabilize, unless it's like legit. All right, we are like World War III or something. But I mean, 2004 was a good year for the S&P, and 2003 is when we went to Iraq. So it's not necessarily always contingent that just because a war starting with the market has to fall. In fact, it's the opposite. PayPal right there down 2%, Amazon down 1%, Meta down 1%, Micron down 2%, AppLovin down 3%. Palantir still making a move right there, 142.91. That is up 4% on the day. Gold, is that taking a hit? Gold's actually falling, guys. Gold was up a lot more than it is right now. It's only up 1.7. It was almost up 3. Even silver giving up a lot of its gains. It was at pushing 97. Now it's at 93.50. So you're not necessarily seeing the level of price action just continue going higher. Home Depot's down 2%. Lowe's is down 2%. A lot of those companies have earnings this week. So we will see what they put up. But again, this is exactly what we saw after Venezuela. Oil gapped up, and then it kind of normalized. The time to really buy this stuff was before the strike. After the strike, everyone's chasing it. So the trade is crowded. And that doesn't mean the trade can't still work, but nonetheless, the trade is crowded. You get any level of reversal, and we're going to talk a lot about valuations tonight. Some of these valuations on the tech companies are becoming kind of stupid. People might wake up and say, maybe we don't need to go into oil and Coke as safety, and we need to go back to some of the tech names. And then you get your reversal right there. Red Cat, does that trade overnight? Let me check Robinhood. It doesn't trade on Webull. Red Cat, that is at 1270, 9% up. Yeah, so all the drone stocks right there. Catching bit of AVAV, yeah, Aero Environment, that's also up 12%. Yep. Yeah, drones catching. Again, it wouldn't surprise me if drones lose their bid tomorrow or continue to get bid up. Same thing with energy, same things with defense contractors. I mean, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. These guys are not going to show earnings growth that justifies a 14% move on Lockheed Martin. But the perspective of the market is, hey, if we're entering like this massive war, Lockheed's going to get a bid. That's why it's up right now. Not because there's anything fundamental around their earnings trajectory that has changed. So if the market changes their environment on that, or their mindset on that, because the environment changes, then boom, Lockheed will gap down. But that is part of the reason why people own these names, for these types of reasons. And as a result, they're getting the benefit right there. Lockheed up 13.2% right here in the overnight markets. All right, so let's get into all the headlines and talk about what's going on right here and how this is exactly playing out. And let's look at a lot of different perspectives. I mean, there's a lot to analyze here. Again, I did not expect the strike to happen in the way that it did, with this kind of Trump assertion that we are officially going after regime change. That to me was like, oh, it's like legit. It's happening. And that is a new world that we're living in. The 10-year right there, 3.96, up a little bit, but well below that 4.2 level we were at a couple of months ago. Trump's goal in Iran is to finish the regime off and eventually topple it, citing person close into Trump, as per Axios. Yeah, Axios has done a pretty good job reporting all this. And once again, it looks like the mentality of the administration here is to go for full-on regime change. I don't understand how they do that without putting real boots on the ground. Like, even if you want to install a puppet government, you need to kind of use force to be there. Even if you have strikes, like at the end of the day, unless you just think everyone's going to come together and have a democracy or something. Like, it is very confusing how exactly this is going to play out. But nonetheless, we're going to all find out over the coming weeks. The Nikkei is down about 2%. Japan is down about 2%. And this is normal. Again, all the major indices will be down at least a little bit. Do we have a Black Monday tomorrow where everything gaps down 10, 15? I don't think so. At the end of the day, there's a lot of reasons we'll talk about today for why that can't happen. But if it does, then look, Trump said he loves the stock market and he loves that it's green. He also likes that oil prices are low because that means gas prices are low. If those two things change because we need to change the regime in Iran, that his legacy is going to be contingent on if he actually gets it. That's the big thing that I think is the larger picture. He's going for regime change, which means his legacy is going to now be contingent on regime change, right? Like this is what, essentially he is staking his legacy on this issue of can he change the Iranian regime and liberate the Iranian people. I don't know exactly why he wanted to go for this. If the threat of the nuclear weapon was larger than what we could possibly imagine, or this is what he just decided to do in the middle of the second term. He didn't run on this, that's for sure. He did not run on this. So now it's a question of if you're going to be successful or not. And if he is going to be successful, I think it's going to take a lot longer than what people think. And I guess all of us will have to figure out how this ends up playing out. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's get into a bunch of different headlines, and then we will keep going from there. So I guess let's start off with kind of how this happened and some of the more real implications of this happening. And I think number one is obviously around oil. So oil is the biggest casualty of all this in terms of prices going higher. As you can see right here, oil is up about 7 to 8%, which is why all the oil stocks are getting their momentum. The largest thing that I think people have been talking about over the weekend is the Strait of Hormuz, which, for those that don't know, 20% of oil supply throughout the entire world goes through. Now, there are counterflicting narratives right here. You got some people saying that it is already closed. You have other people saying that it is going to be closed. And I found this 3-minute video. I think this does a really good job explaining what are the implications of if it were to close. And although people are saying, well, the U.S. is energy independent and it doesn't really matter for the U.S., that's a very, very naive perspective, because it does matter for a lot of other countries, which we get a lot of our products from, aka China. And if it messes them up, then it obviously can mess up the United States. So let's take a look at this, and then I think we'll talk about how this reflects with oil, and we'll keep going from there.
If Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz, what impact will it have on the entire world, and which country will be affected the most? First, let's understand what the Strait of Hormuz actually is. It is a small area of just 33 kilometers located between Iran, Oman, and the UAE. It is a narrow sea passage through which almost 20% of the world's oil supply flows, nearly 17 million barrels every day. This oil comes from 8 countries located in the Persian Gulf, including Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. For the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar, 90% of their oil exports pass through this narrow route to reach the rest of the world. If Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz, following countries will suffer the most damage. First is India, because it imports 85% of its oil, and 60% of that comes from Middle Eastern countries like Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the UAE. Fuel prices in India would skyrocket, and as a result, everything related to oil and all industries would face severe disruption. Industries could shut down, there would be job losses, and the economy would be severely affected. The second most affected country would be China. China is the world's largest oil importer, bringing in 10 million barrels of oil every day. 40% of China's oil imports pass through this Strait of Hormuz. Although China has built oil pipelines with Russia and Central Asia, they don't even fulfill 20% of its energy needs. So, if the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, China's economy could suffer a massive blow. And if China's economy is shaken, its effects will be felt all over the world. The third most affected country would be Japan, as it imports 90% of its oil, and 75% of that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. The fourth most affected country would be Saudi Arabia. 80 to 90% of Saudi Arabia's oil goes to the rest of the world through Strait of Hormuz, while only 10% goes to Europe via its Red Sea coastline. So if this choke point is blocked, Saudi Arabia's economy will be heavily impacted. Imagine that a country suddenly loses 80 to 90% of its revenue. What would happen to it? Something similar could happen to Saudi Arabia. There's also a high chance that Saudi Arabia might send in its military to reopen the route, and that could make the situation even worse. Fifth is Pakistan, which gets about 90% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. This oil meets around 27% of the country's energy needs. So if the route is blocked, prices in Pakistan could rise sharply. But there's an interesting twist. Since Pakistan shares a border with Iran, and several government reports suggest that 35% of Pakistan's diesel comes unofficially from Iran. So if the strait is blocked, Pakistan might turn to Iran for oil, either quietly or through an official deal. Next in line is the UAE, because as nearly as 72% of its oil exports rely on this Strait of Hormuz. The country does have a backup option, the Habshan-Fujairah pipeline, which allows it to bypass the strait and export up to 60% of its oil. But for a major economy like the UAE, losing the remaining 40% would still be a serious blow. Next comes the European countries like France, Germany and Italy, which on average get 10% of their oil through the Strait of Hormuz. A blockade here would hit them hard as well. Globally, experts warn that oil prices could soar past $150 a barrel, causing widespread inflation and possibly triggering a major global recession. So this small 33-kilometer area holds enough power to shake the entire world.
And that's pretty much what JP Morgan came out today and said as well. They put out a note to their clients and pretty much made the argument that said, look, we don't think oil going up would be good for equities, but this is something that we have to price in if this were to happen. And it's not something necessarily you can forget about, because if it were to be, ugly, and this is their scenario modeling right here, then basically in the worst case scenario, they see a $15 increase for the price of oil if the closure continues to be intense. Now, based on that video, I think there were a couple things that were also really important, which is number one, let's say Iran really did try to close off the Strait of Hormuz and it was, very aggressive and no one could go through it. Saudi Arabia's military is not going to be happy about that because they've, made an entire country off of selling oil. And you've got a lot of other countries that are going to be pretty upset about that. China, India, they might have their militaries get involved as well. And, that's the theory that you see people peddling around about this could be the start of World War III. I think that's very aggressive just to say the Strait of Hormuz closing because at some point, the Iranian military might be able to block it off. But if it's a question of like global oil supply, other militaries will get involved and probably make sure that Strait of Hormuz opens up. But nonetheless, I think that's why oil prices are spiking right now in the overnight markets. Ethereum right there at 197, Bitcoin at 66. And that's why you're seeing the oil stocks run up, which is based on this idea that, hey, like if this ends up being the route that Iran wants to go, then we're going to have some broader issues in regards to how to navigate it. Now, speaking of China, I think one thing that was really interesting is you haven't had too much word publicly around China and Russia in regards to their defense of Iran. I think they put out some statements saying that we condemn the United States for attacking or acting in this way, in this manner, but they are not happy with, but they have not come out in a way that expresses their unhappiness to the point where they're going to defend Iran in some meaningful way. Same thing that happened with Venezuela. We're getting a quote right here. Trump just now told the New York Times, similar to Venezuela, that they could remove the top leader and much of the rest of the Iranian government could stay in place as a deal. Again, that would be similar to Venezuela. And part of the reason for that is because Iran has also become a nuisance to a lot of parts of the world, including China and Russia. I mean, this is one of those countries that is one of the largest state proxies for terrorism. And, it's part of the reason why many countries did not like dealing with them. In fact, the Washington Post, which they might be wrong about this, but they were reporting over the weekend that as in video goes green, which is not too bad, that the Saudi prince, MBS, was calling up Trump over the past couple of weeks saying, hey, you need to do something about these Iranians. So you've got Israel with Netanyahu, obviously, who wanted to start something around the Middle East. They've been saying this for a long time, that we need to strike Iran. You've got, the overall administration, Marco Rubio, saying that they have the capacity to develop a ballistic missile. And then you have the potential ramifications of the other parts of the Middle East that are not happy about Iran in a variety of different reasons, because again, they don't want to embrace terrorism, but they are having to deal with Hezbollah and all the other different terrorist forces that are there, saying, hey, maybe we need to do something about this. All of that put together, I don't know if that necessarily justified or what was the justification for why Trump did what he did, but that could be one of the many reasons. And now we're here and we're having to navigate what's going to happen to oil prices when this happens. The bigger implications of oil prices as well is that as oil prices go up, the input costs, intrinsic, extrinsic, implicit, or explicit in every single part of our economy increases. There's data centers that use tons of oil. There's airlines that use tons of oil. Electricity obviously is contingent on it. So the ability for prices to gap up and affect everyday consumers is not the best thing in the world. And I think that's the largest sort of economic argument we've seen so far outside of the political ramifications of this when it comes to oil. Reading right now from the New York Times, in a brief telephone interview, Mr. Trump offered several seemingly contradictory visions of how power might be transferred to a new government, or even whether the existing Iranian power structure would run that government to be overthrown. Among the options he suggested was an outcome similar to what he engineered in Venezuela. The assault on Iran is considered far more complex and risky than the operation to capture Maduro, who was Venezuela's leader, in part because Iran's leadership oversees extensive military abilities and because of deep divides in Iranian society over the country's course. Which, once again, goes to the argument that this is not going to be a one and done type of event. This is likely going to take longer. Trump did admit over the past couple of hours, he has a quote to Axios that this will likely go on for the next 4 weeks. It's always been a 4-week process. We figured out it will be a 4-week process. It's always been about a 4-week process. So as strong as it is, it's a big country. It'll take 4 weeks or less, which is what Trump said a couple hours ago. So oil, I think, is the big part of this from an economic perspective that we have to talk about. Having said that, now we get into the conversation around, why this happened, how this happened, and if this is going to continue to be something that is intense for both different sides of the factions of Iran. So from the research I've done over the weekend, there's two different perspectives. There's the perspective that praises the Ayatollah and, has this deep sort of religious inclination to express that Iran deserves to be governed the way it is through religious law. And as a result, no one should be able to mess that up. And then you've got a lot of other people, and this is not anything new. If you've been keeping up with any of the protests, you've seen this over the past couple of months, that are really, really tired of how the regime has been operating. Part of this has to go for a variety of things. The one that's been the most advertised is obviously women's rights and, the inability to wear a hijab and have freedom and do what you want and always being stuck with your husband. Lots of different parts have simply not been modernized. And, I actually did a paper on the Iran-Iraq war when I was in high school. And, I was going through the different things that I talked about in that paper and how that war came out. But after that, or because of the Iranian Revolution, you have that war. And this is Iran post the takeover. And it looks very Western. It wasn't fully capitalist the way that you had the United States, but when the Shah was in power, it was very different. And after the Ayatollah came to power and you had a fundamentalism approach to how we should think of ways of life, for the past 47 years, it's been more of a structure of oppression. And at least, based on the couple of people that I talked to over the weekend that are pretty deep into Iranian politics, that have obviously lived in Iran, have family from Iran, their arguments were this guy was not the guy. And it was finally time to make a change. The problem, again, with regime change is once you actually say you're going to change the regime, how do you follow through? How do you get the job done? How do you make sure someone else who isn't just super fundamental starts to take in place? I mean, part of the reason Saudi Arabia is a big ally with the United States is and why we would never go for regime change there is although they are conservative and strict from a religious perspective, and they have religious police. Now, Iran has like serious religious police, which is like, if you're doing anything wrong, you can like really face the consequences of it. MBS has modernized a lot because he knows that for his country to be successful and to exist in the modern economy and for the United States to want to cooperate with them, then you need to open up the elements of capitalism. You need to open up women can drive in Saudi Arabia now. I think that changed around 2018. And as a result, we're not messing with Saudi Arabia because they are not state sponsors of terror. They're not necessarily trying to limit women to literally just being in the household date. Like there's a variety of different nuances between how they think of Islam as a governing principle versus how Iran did. And as a result, I think that begs the question, did it make sense for the United States to actually do what we did based on the premise of freedom? And as a result of that, I'm going to put a poll in the chat and see what people think. I mean, this is, and a couple of polls I've seen already over the weekend, only 1 in 4 people support the strikes on Iran. And that was actually coming from the Times of Israel, which you would think Israel and that news publication has an incentive to say a lot of people support this, but 25% of supporting these strikes as an American is pretty weak, to say the least. Do you think the strikes were the right move? Whether you're an American or not, you can answer this. I don't know, and this goes into the political conversation, if there is enough energy in the United States to say this was the right thing to do. In fact, there is a lot of conflicting narratives. Narratives I've seen over the weekend from people who are more so on the right are saying, hey, this is about freedom, this is about liberty, democracy, this is something we needed to do. Trump, people naturally feel a bit more patriotic because we've come together, we've had this operation. That's some support. And then you've got a lot of people on the left saying, okay, yes, the Ayatollah was a bad person. This is, I think, what basically Harris and Newsom said over the weekend. But the way that Trump went about this sort of illegal strike of just like forgetting about Congress, not going through the War Powers Act and just actually going for it was not the right way to do it. Having said that, most presidents, if they're going to strike, I mean, Obama didn't get a ton of permission for a lot of the strikes that he was doing in Syria. You're either going to do it or not do it, but the sort of velocity of how it happened and the magnitude by which the impact is now being seen is being debated in a very, very heavy way. And I don't know. I really don't know how the American people are going to embrace this. If this is a successful operation, which to me, success is defined as this happens quick and you move on, like what happened with Venezuela, which I don't know how that results in a regime change because there is no regime change in Venezuela either. I don't know how it can be quick, but that's how I can understand the American people saying, okay, it happened and like we can move forward and maybe there was something good we got out of it. But if oil prices are up and, there's nothing necessarily to show for it for people living in this country other than the, I guess, hopes and optimism we have about Iranian freedom. Yeah, that's like, I'm not denying Iranian freedom is not good. I'm saying how many people in the United States actually care? Like when we're talking about realistically, how many feel like we voted for Trump to free the Iranian people? I don't think anyone did. Like, I don't think anyone voted for Trump to free the Iranian people. As much as I personally do think it is a good thing to spread freedom or try to spread freedom, the way that you try to do it ends up being heavily debated. And that brings up a lot more nuance on like if it actually is the not even ethical thing to do, but strategic thing to do. You can all agree it's more ethical for people to have freedom. The way in which you get there, I think, is the hard part. And then on top of that, there wasn't a lot of acknowledgement in the context of Congress and the Pentagon, which also brings up the question of how legal it was.
Yeah, Caitlin, just like most of the administration's explanations for why now, why was this operation against Iran launched now, this briefing happened in private, but we're told that Pentagon briefers did make a stark acknowledgement, and that was that no, there was no indication that Iran was preparing to preemptively strike U.S. bases in the region in anticipation of some sort of an attack from American and Israeli forces. And that's something that senior administration officials had said on Saturday that they believed was true. And that was something that contributed to the timing of this operation. So raising more questions still as the president, we haven't heard from him about his reasoning, his justification, and his plan going forward as this military operation continues.
And that's the big thing. There has been no level of reasoning or justification on why we did this outside of the 8-minute video we got. And that video Saturday night was, we can't let them have a nuke. Again, we were engaged in diplomacy and bilateral conversations over the past 2 weeks. Those conversations ended up not going to the extent that Trump wanted it to go to, which is, hey, we will absolutely give up all of our enriched uranium. So is Trump saying that we think they are so close to a nuclear weapon, which part of the strikes in June were to put them back years, which is what I thought we did, or what I thought Trump said we did. But are they actually, did that not do anything? Because if we had to act in the way that we had to act so abruptly over the weekend, it makes you think there was a different reason for why we did it. And if it's only for nukes, again, I wonder if the base is going to accept that, because I don't think people voted for Trump for the second term to not let Iran get nukes. They voted for lower gas prices. And this is the broader conversation that I think the country's going to have. And now you got Ted Cruz also saying, hey, I have no indication that Iran was close to getting nuclear weapons.
And if so, who is doing it if there are no Israeli or U.S. forces on the ground?
So there is no doubt that a year ago, Iran had an active and ongoing nuclear weapons program. We took out the vast majority of that at the end of the 12-day war.
That U.S. intelligence assessment was not made public, if that is what was briefed to you.
We launched targeted bombs at the end of the 12-day war, where we dropped the equivalent of about a third of a nuclear weapon on those underground facilities like Fordo, which is built into the base of a mountain. The bunker buster bombs we used, Israel doesn't have those bombs. No other country has those bombs. We took them out last year. The Iranians we're still hell-bent on rebuilding them. And one of the things we are doing right now is taking out their missiles, in particular, the southern missile belt. Right now, Iran is building roughly 100 missiles a month. They're actively building missiles to threaten their neighbors. And
They're
and I
firing
would
some of
point
them
out,
right now at their neighbors,
yeah,
at our allies.
they're illustrating powerfully. They're attacking virtually every Arab neighbor that surrounds them. They are firing missiles at. It's almost like they want to illustrate to the world just how malign they are.
But in terms of containing the risk, who's securing the nuclear material that you say still exists within Iran? Who's doing that?
Look, the quantity of nuclear material, I didn't say anything one way or another on that. What I said is they were building nuclear weapons a year ago, and our bombing took that out. They also had an ongoing desire to rebuild them. I don't have present day intelligence on what progress they had made towards rebuilding nuclear weapons since we bombed their facilities. I have no indication that.
And again, that's really important, because if there's not any significant level of progress on actually being able to build nuclear weapons, did we have to strike? Now, maybe Ted Cruz doesn't know about it. Maybe the administration and Trump have a lot more intelligence than him and understand how bad it was or could be. But I think a lot of American people are going to start to expect, hey, how did this happen? Why did this happen? I mean, Iraq was pretty obvious, 9/11, right? Weapons of mass destruction. There was a justification, even if that justification people didn't agree with, but you could point to something. For this, it kind of just like, I don't know, it felt like it came out of nowhere. It's like, boom, they got nuclear weapons. Now, people can point to the protests, 30,000 people killed by that is all fair. I don't know if that is the reason Trump decided, because people are getting killed in protests, we are going for full-on regime change. There's a disconnect there. Like there's a little bit of is that really the reason? Because they didn't care about that for the past 10 years. And so how serious is this? Now, again, not to undermine that the Iranian military might seriously be getting ready to create a nuclear weapon. Even Kamala Harris, this was one of the big things on the campaign trail when she was asked about, what would happen if Iran were to attack. Her argument was also that something would have to be done. And so maybe it got to the point where it was getting so bad and this was the opportunity to go after it. But I just don't think we have a fully fledged amount of data to be able to make that assessment. Nonetheless, it is starting to create a back and forth attack across the entire world. This was a video from Jerusalem about an hour ago. This one also a bit graphic of a missile that gets hit in Israel. It's going to end up being super fast before it ends up making a hit.
God.
That's where civilians are. I mean, this is very real. Like this is actually happening, right? So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, the Iron Dome is pretty good, but it's not going to get every single missile. And that was a missile that the Iron Dome didn't end up getting. And boom, you end up seeing the attack. So if Trump says this is going on for the next 4 weeks, which we're getting some quotes from Bloomberg right here, Hezbollah strikes in retaliation over Iran leader assassination. Hezbollah claims attack on Israel. If this is the video that they're talking about, then this potentially could have been Hezbollah saying they're claiming the responsibility for this. Then once again, this seems like we're going back and forth. And I don't necessarily know when that's going to end. Again, for the stock market, and we'll get back to some sort of more market fundamentals in a second. I don't think this is going to have the biggest impact in the world. We've been through this over and over and over again. The markets end up rallying and or weathering the storm. So you're seeing the red prices right here. It's like we've been used to 2% red days across the market on a random Sunday night where there's no real important news. So seeing this happen right here, like if this was like 8-7% down, it's a little bit more aggressive, but we're not seeing any of that. And I think that's what people expected. S&P down 0.44. Okay, down $3. Like, we were down more than that on Friday in and of itself. So could it get bad for the market? Sure. But I think the broader question is, are we legit getting into a war that's going to last a very long time? Or is this going to be one and done? Are we going to be able to topple the regime, install a new regime? Is that going to even be effective given the power vacuum that it creates? And are we going to move forward? And I think that's the confusing part. I really, really, really do think that is the confusing part. And I think from acknowledging both sides, one side, which I think a lot of people agree with, is that something needed to be done about the regime. The other side, which I think is also very valid, is every time the U.S. has tried to take this type of action, it's not necessarily resulted in something that good. And that's not just me saying that. That is Trump himself plenty of times saying we don't want a war with Iran. Things change. And I think now his presidency is going to be rooted in how this ultimately ends up playing out. So those are sort of the main updates we have here. We'll talk a lot more about markets right now, but I don't think this is going to have a massive impact on markets. 58% of you in the chat think that the strikes were the right move. 42% say no. 60-40, honestly, is kind of the vibe that I'm getting just from looking at my timeline. We'll talk about the Anthropic CEO, lots to talk about with him, and there was a lot of controversies over the weekend about that as well, so we'll discuss it. But it's just, from my perspective, it was confusing as hell. Saturday morning, 1 a.m., seeing Trump drop that video saying, hey, Iranian people, it's time to fight for your freedom, and we're going to liberate you. I didn't expect that to be that explicit. And now if it's happening, okay, Trump is tying his legacy, his administration, and the American people's success to the Iranian people's success, which is completely contradictory to what he's been running on over the past 10 years. Things can change. You're allowed to evolve. I think a lot of us are wondering why it evolved, how quickly it evolved, what intelligence was there to force a decision of this magnitude, and how long this is going to last. So I guess time will tell. Having said that, I'm not selling shit. I'm not selling shit, bro. So let's transition to the markets. This is not something you sell into. Like, just every time you see this type of stuff happen, I don't think you get scared and sell your stocks. And part of the reason for that is because we are finally done with February. And take a look at a couple of these charts right here. March tends to be better. March tends to be a lot better. So historically, this is from 2006 to 2025, the average year for the S&P 500 over the past 20 years, you get 10.4% on average. If you take a look at this dip right here, February tends to suck. As you get into March, things change. If you look at this right here, March and April are two of the historical best months for the S&P 500 from 1950 to 2025. Again, midterm years are not the best, and we are in a midterm year. April tends to be low for a midterm year. March tends to be up for a midterm year. We have the sort of midterms cloud all over the entire market, which is something we're going to have to deal with. But February objectively sucks across the board. And it doesn't feel like February slumps, or the February slump was different this time. We had a lot of different things that we had to deal with, which we'll talk about. All of those things coincided into February, and it feels like things potentially can change. And part of the reason is this chart right here. Earnings are continued to expect to remain strong. EPS estimates for 2026 are $313, which once again is significant growth on the S&P 500 from 2025. If we put let's do a 25 multiple on 313, you get to 7,800. If we put a 22 multiple, you get right there around 7,200. So it's not that crazy to imagine that if you take the S&P premium right now and give it to the earnings growth that we're expected to get, we're going to be probably above that 7,000 level. And hopefully in March and April, we have a chance to actually get above those levels, given what has happened over the past month, which again was ugly in a lot of different areas. Having said that, you had Dario, who did an interview. Now, this is a really important topic. And this will kind of blend into all the AI stuff that we're talking about, because a lot of this ultimately affects the market. Remember, the big news last week was not only that OpenAI raised at a $730 billion, it was also that Dario, the CEO of Anthropic, rejected the Department of War being able to get access to Claude to be able to engage in military operations. There were two things that he didn't want, which was surveillance and autonomous weapons. And the Department of War basically said, we're not going to do that, but we don't want to have to prove to you that we're not going to do that. He said he wanted proof. And as a result, you've had this back and forth. Sam Altman, who on Friday morning announcing that deal with Andy Jassy, Amazon giving them $50 billion as a part of their $110 billion raise. Well, he said he supported Anthropic, holding true to their, ethics and values of not compromising. And then, this is why he might be one of the best deal makers of all time. And then late Friday night, which is why Friday night was crazy, because right after this tweet, you had the whole Iran situation happen. Tonight, we reached an agreement with the Department of War to deploy our models in their classified network. It's very technical, his response to why they're different than Anthropic. And it goes down to well, we kind of agree with this, and they told us they would do this. And so the architecture that we built is this and this and that. At its core, none of it matters. Literally none of it matters. And you know the reason why none of it matters? Because now the #1 app store or the number one app in the App Store is Claude. People don't give a shit about his explanation. People don't care about how specific the technical jargon is that he's pointing out to be able to make the claim that you can see right there, Claude dethroning ChatGPT, to dethrone the claim about what OpenAI is saying around why they get to work with the DOW. They're just assuming, hey, bro, Pete Hegseth said we wanted to do stuff, and you said, yeah, just tell us you won't do it, and then we're good to go. Whereas Dario wanted like written confirmation, you will not do this. And they were like, no, Sam, we'll give you a handshake agreement, wink of an eye, and then we're good to go. And Sam was like, yep, that's good enough for me. Dario wanted a lot more. So this was also very, very incredible to see that Sam Altman, who saw a massive opportunity to quite literally infiltrate the government and get a lot of money, decided to take the opportunity. And you had a lot of people that are switching to Claude right now are super upset, and they're kind of making the argument that Dario stood for morals and Sam Altman did it.
And very lean forward. We have a substantial, public sector team. But I have always believed that, as we defend ourselves against our autocratic adversaries, we have to do so in ways that defend our democratic values and preserve our democratic values. And so we have said to the Department of War that we are okay with all use cases, basically 98 or 99% of the use cases they want to do, except for two that we're concerned about. One is domestic mass surveillance. There, we're worried that things may become possible with AI that weren't possible before. An example of this is something like taking data collected by private firms, having it bought by the government, and analyzing it in mass via AI. That actually isn't illegal. It was just never useful before the era of AI. So there's this way in which domestic mass surveillance is getting ahead of the law. The technology is advancing so fast that it's out of step with the law. That's case number one. Case number two is fully autonomous weapons. This is not the partially autonomous weapons that are used in Ukraine or could potentially be used in Taiwan today. This is the idea of making weapons that fire without any human involvement. Mm-hmm. Now, even those, I think that our adversaries may at some point have them. So perhaps they may at some point be needed for the defense of democracy. But we have some concerns about them. First, the AI systems of today are nowhere near reliable enough to make fully autonomous weapons. Anyone who's worked with AI models.
He goes on further to basically justify Anthropic's position about why they chose not to work with the Department of War unless they got sort of this explicit agreement that they would not end up doing mass surveillance or fully autonomous weapons. And look, I read through a lot of Sam Altman's responses. It really is, it's so incredibly technical, not in the terms of like some type of computer science technical response, but like the jargon that he's using to justify how they were able to get the same exact terms that Anthropic was given, but end up agreeing to the deal, whereas Anthropic didn't agree to the deal. I think there is some validity to what Altman is saying about how they ended up getting it done. But perception-wise, there's like 99% of people are going to be like, okay, you compromised. Like you agreed to the Department of War that you would give in to what they were saying, and you have enough faith in the Department of War that they're not going to be super explicit with the technology to do the types of things that Dario's afraid of. Whereas Dario probably could have said the same. He's like, yeah, the U.S. is relatively good compared to the rest of the world, and we're going to trust that the Department of War doesn't do horrible stuff. But he wanted something more explicit. And as a result of wanting that explicit response, that's why Trump tweeted on Friday that Anthropic will be phased out of the entire government because of their woke ideological leader, all the stuff that he was tweeting. That is why Sam Altman was able to come in and literally in the middle of the night, end up taking this deal. So as a result of this, the implication now means what is going to happen to the AI stocks. And quite frankly, I think NVIDIA continues to win. All the AI companies continue to do well. What it does mean is that Anthropic might end up getting a little bit of a leg up in terms of the consumer, not in a meaningful way, right? ChatGPT still has 910 million users, and most people are not going to cancel their subscription because of this. But you see Claude is number one in the App Store. They're probably going to get a lot more people that want to support the morality of Dario. And GPT is going to get access to the government business, which they already had a meaningful government business. But now, when you're talking about military actions that are critical on the battlefield, that's a whole level of revenue for, it's a $200 million contract that Anthropic's losing, which is whatever the eventual $2-3 billion contract that OpenAI is going to get over the coming years. That is what I think seems to be a bit more important. And it looks like OpenAI is going to get a leg up on that. According to Axios, the United States and Israel delayed their planned Iran strike by a week from the original February 21st date. That actually makes sense because there were a lot of poly market bets around February 21st, which was last Saturday, for a strike to happen. And, that strike didn't end up happening. So makes sense that Axios might be right on that it ended up delayed by a week. The other thing that was really important about this is Kalshi, which had a prediction market that was rooted in if the Ayatollah will eventually not be in power anymore, which if I told you, hey, you could vote on the Ayatollah not being in office anymore, you would probably tell me, oh, because he's going to die, right? Because he's probably going to get murked. Well, that's what a lot of people bet on Kalshi's platform. And Tarek, the CEO, comes out and says, we don't list markets directly tied to death. So we are reversing the outcomes of this market and we are refunding everyone's money. You talk about two companies that didn't necessarily have the best PR over the weekend, OpenAI and now Kalshi. The amount of people that got pissed because they won a lot of money because they voted on something before something happened. But Tarek's like, no, we meant, him stepping down from power. That was the point. It's like, what? You think the supreme leader who's been in power for 37 years was going to step down from power? That's why people were betting on this. No, obviously you thought there's a chance he could get killed in a strike. And that's what people were betting on. So yeah, a lot of people that are absolutely pissed off and they're going to poly market. And I would imagine this is going to have a lot of different lawsuits. Hood did not have this market. Hood is, Hood touches politics, but they don't get this deep into politics. Kalshi and Polymarket uniquely have this. The sad thing about this is that Polymarket, because it's offshore, it's crypto, there's no rules and regulations. The United States literally does not let you have these types of prediction markets or these types of markets that are tied to death as a specific outcome. Now, one could argue that if you go long oil futures on Friday because you think a strike is going to happen and people die as a result of that strike, and then you profit off that theoretically because oil prices go up. So there's a lot of gray lines behind it, but they don't allow the explicit nature of it. And that's what Kalshi got caught up in. Polymarket, they don't give a shit because who knows where the hell Polymarket is being run from. And you have a lot of new accounts that joined Friday night that basically 10x their money. One could argue they probably knew some people in the administration that gave them a little bit of a tip that, the strike was going to happen. And, you had people turn 50,000 into $500,000 based on getting the exact date of the strike and the exact outcome of it right. So these prediction markets continue to go wild, but Kalshi did not really get the benefit of the doubt, at least from a PR perspective. Pound right there, 142.50, still up 4% in the overnight markets. BTC, we are at 66.4. And then you got NVIDIA right there at 176.58. Farzad, thank you for the super chat. Free Iran amid is the GOAT. Michael Burry sucks. Appreciate you, Farzad. Hopefully he will be on the show tomorrow, either market open or market close. And we'll get to talk to him again. Farzad is, his parents are from Iran. They left in 1979 during the revolution. And I think he has a lot of perspectives on this that are super useful. And, when I was talking to him over the weekend, he kind of had the same two perspectives that are out there, which is this needed to happen. Something needed to happen to the regime. But the inevitability of a power vacuum is something that obviously will mess up any of this happening in the first place, and it will make it render useless. So I think from that perspective, there's mixed signals on if this was the right thing to do, even though he himself, as an Iranian, is very happy that it ended up needing to happen. Market close, most likely. All right, cool. We will get Farzad on the market close. Druckenmiller. So we had a bunch of quotes from Druckenmiller over the weekend. He had a brand new podcast. We talked about the main quotes on Friday. He's long international markets. He's not short AI, but he's not as optimistic on AI. Here's another clip that I thought was really interesting about NVIDIA and kind of how he played it in 2022.
I don't think I knew how to spell NVIDIA. how to spell NVIDIA 3 months before. And when the stock took off, I knew through years of experience, when you have massive, massive change, investors just can't make themselves keep up with it. And it was funny because the person who knew 10 times more than anybody at the table and probably 50 times more than me about AI, he sold his NVIDIA shortly thereafter. But I knew that this stock would go up for at least 2 or 3 years and go up a lot. And I said publicly in an interview about 5 months later, I cannot possibly see myself selling NVIDIA over the next 2 or 3 years, because it had already gone from like 150 to 390, and this person couldn't believe I still owned it. And I basically said, not only do I own it, the way these things evolve, this stock can't not go up for at least 3 years. So then the stock goes to 800. And I violated everything I said in the interview. I couldn't stand success. It gone from 150 to 800. I was long term in it. I couldn't deal with it. And I sold it. And then it was 1400 like 5 weeks later, and I was sick. But it's amazing how little I knew about NVIDIA. I couldn't even tell you what the earnings were.
It's kind of funny, right? You have a legendary hedge fund manager like Druckenmiller who's like, dude, I didn't know how to spell it. I didn't know what the cash flow statement was. I didn't know what their EBITDA margins were. All I knew was that AI was real and it was going higher. And he sold it $2 trillion before it got to being, you know, a $4.3 trillion market cap. Sounds like a degen. 100% sounds like, literally the story before that was he was saying one of his, you know, Druckenmiller was early in Palantir as well. He ended up not holding for a long time, or at least not during like its public. They did well because they got in early in the private markets, but you know, if they had held their entire stake until Palantir went to like 180, they would have made a lot more money. But I think they ended up selling at $20. But he said the reason they invested in Palantir was because there were a bunch of kids in Palo Alto back in like 2008 that were talking about Palantir, and he went to check it out and he was like, all right, I'm going to invest in these guys. And for NVIDIA, one of his AI guys was like, hey, like this AI thing is important. He was like, how do I play it? He was like, NVIDIA. He was like, okay, I'm buying NVIDIA. So obviously he trusted the people he was asking a lot, but it really didn't have to do that much with the numbers. It had to do more with the narrative, the catalysts. And, you know, that's why they ended up getting into it, which is not that different from a retail investor that, quite frankly, doesn't care that much about the quantitative elements, which are important. And NVIDIA has obviously put up a lot of quantitative elements to make you want to, you know, think that there's a meaningful bull case, even from a value perspective. But the story sometimes matters a lot more. Unfortunately, over the past couple months, the story has not been exactly what matters when it comes to the markets. Valuations have mattered a lot more, but that's also the ups and downs of the markets. You know, valuations come in, they go out. As of now, given the value stocks like Coke and Verizon that are catching a bid, the market cares a lot more about valuations. Also, software continues to be incredible. Retail investors now reflect a record 8% of total trading volume in the S&P 500's software sector. This percentage has doubled since 2022. And according to JP Morgan, retail trading activity in the sector has historically only been higher than it is now in 3% of cases. So once again, you're seeing retail not really care that deeply about anything else other than the fact that these names have been so depressed and have got hit so hard that, you know, they feel it's time to meaningfully buy the dip. And that's why they are doing that. So you're seeing more momentum in software. You're obviously seeing momentum in defense names, oil, and it looks like we'll see by the end of the week if those same sectors still catch a bid. But I would be really surprised if Raytheon is up 14% by the end of the week. I mean, again, this is a pump because people want to play it right now. Raytheon right there up 8%, Lockheed Martin up 14%. And eventually, you know, people start to realize maybe we're not going to World War III. And if we're not, then we might be okay. Well, that's another question for everybody. How long do we think this will continue to last? Let's do a poll on that, because that's the other real issue with how the market's trying to price what's going on right here. Like, how aggressive is this going to be? Is it going to be years? Is it going to be months? Is it going to be weeks? Or is it going to be less than that? By the way, I think Trump is talking to reporters right now. Do I have this footage? No, he's actually, the video is him not answering reporters. Okay, so this is him getting off the plane and him not actually talking to reporters yet. Okay, so how long does this last? Let's do 2 weeks, 2 months, 4 months, 5 months plus. So 2 weeks would be a small amount of time. There's the president right there. And then the rest is longer. 48 hours. Well, you know, the thing is, we got rid of the supreme leader, which would make you think, okay, you know, if we're thinking of this like Midnight Hammer, the job is done. But then based on some of these quotes we're getting from the administration, it's about regime change. And regime change is not done like just because you get rid of the leader, because, you know, then there will be more people that are involved. So if that's going to be resulting in it taking a longer time, then maybe that doesn't necessarily play out. It's already over. You know, I thought after the supreme leader was announced dead on Saturday evening that we are close to it being done. But the more I think about it, the more I think that's just like a naive take to think that it's already done. And if it is done and that's all we went to do, then we didn't really do anything. Right? Because if you just get someone else who's super fundamentalist around the way that Iran has been being governed, and no one really gets their freedom, and the religious police continue to be strict and intact, and they continue to be a state sponsor of terror, and they continue to keep building their nuclear weapons, even if we delayed them for years. Like, if we don't actually put an end to all of the things that we've been complaining about, then it's almost like, what was the point of going through this? And that's why I don't think it's over. Even though you want to believe it's over. But it doesn't feel like that. And not to mention, yes, attacks right now are already happening at this moment. Some of the attacks have been pretty ugly, dude. Bahrain, you had an entire apartment complex that got hit with Iranian bombs. And, you know, Iran basically started saying, all right, if you're going to mess with us, we're going to mess with a bunch of other proxies, not just Israel. And you started seeing a lot of attacks on U.S. military bases across the Middle East. Now, there were rumors in the morning today that they struck a U.S. ship. I believe it was the Lincoln. That ended up being false. If a U.S. ship ended up getting hit pretty bad, I think we would have seen a even bigger retaliation from the United States. Well, that's the thing about Iran. They know they can't really meaningfully attack the United States or any of our allies in a way that causes serious damage. Like, if Iran really tried to do something bad, like something hardcore, I mean, like, again, the United States is not going to tolerate it, not in any sense of the imagination. And they know that, which is why they tend to never go that far, even though they do go far. Which then begs the question, how far are we willing to go to ultimately get this regime change? Can they attack New Jersey? I do not think they can. They would need very sophisticated intercontinental ballistic missiles to do that. Right now, there's only a couple countries that really have the ability. I actually do this. This got me down the whole rabbit hole of World War III. I have another video that's pretty good on this if you want to see it. But it talks about what would happen in a World War III scenario and what countries actually have the ability to attack, how the United States would attack. It's actually very informative. But Iran is nowhere near doing that stuff, at least to my understanding. But maybe Trump got different intel, and that's where he got scared. And he was like, if we don't do this now, then we're screwed. And, you know, I guess over time, we'll have a much better understanding of if this plays out. Let's watch it. Okay. It's a couple minutes, but I do think this was pretty informative on kind of how this could end up playing out.
In World War III. For most of human history, the United States has been invincible. Protected by two massive oceans, it was a fortress that no army could touch. But technology has killed geography. Today, the threat isn't coming from a boat, it's coming from the edge of space. Before we look at where the bombs will fall, we have to understand who is sending them. The list of nations that can successfully strike the American mainland is terrifyingly short. First, there is Russia. They possess the largest nuclear arsenal on Earth, with heavy ICBMs like the Sarmat that can reach any point in the US in under 30 minutes. Second is China. For decades, they had a small force, but they are rapidly building hundreds of new missile silos in their desert. They can now hit the East Coast, the West Coast, and everything in between. And then, the wild card, North Korea. Their Hwasong 15 and 17 missiles have theoretically demonstrated the range to hit Washington, D.C., though their accuracy is still debated. So, if the leaders in Moscow, Beijing, or Pyongyang decide to push the button, they aren't going to fire randomly at Times Square or Disney World. That is a Hollywood myth. Real war is about math. It's about crippling the enemy's ability to fight back. If Russia or China attacks, they will prioritize counterforce targets. They will try to destroy America's nukes before America can launch them. And unfortunately for the people living there, America keeps its biggest guns in 10 specific states. These are the 10 states that will be sacrificed to save the rest of the country. At number 1, it is North Dakota. North Dakota is the only state.
I did not know about this. It's actually really interesting if you're an American where our nukes are positioned.
That holds the nuclear trifecta. 1. Minot Air Force Base. This is the only base in the U.S. that houses both nuclear-capable B-52 bombers and Minuteman III missiles. 2. Radar systems. It sits on the northern edge, hosting the critical radars that track incoming fire. 3. Storage. Massive fuel and weapon depots. North Dakota is, quite literally, a powder keg. If you are a general in China or Russia, you look at North Dakota and you see the single biggest threat to your existence. If you destroy North Dakota, you destroy a huge chunk of America's ability to fight back by land and by air. It is a use it or lose it target. In a full-scale nuclear exchange, North Dakota would be hit with dozens, perhaps hundreds of warheads within the first 15 minutes of the war. The sheer amount of thermal energy released would turn the winter snow into steam instantly. The shock waves would flatten everything for hundreds of miles. The US government chose North Dakota to be the ultimate shield. It is the state most likely to burn so that the rest of America might survive. At number 2, we have the state that acts as the front door. It is Montana. Look at the map. If a missile flies from Russia to the US, it comes over the Arctic Circle. The first US state it crosses is Montana. Montana hosts the Malmstrom Air Force Base, which controls one of the largest missile fields in the world, 341st Missile Wing. Because Montana is geographically closer to Russia than the other missile states, the flight time for its missiles is shorter. This makes Montana the most aggressive threat. If the US president orders a strike, the missiles from Montana will hit Moscow first. Therefore, Russia must hit Montana first. There is no waiting. There is no negotiation. If the radar shows a war is starting, the first wave of enemy warheads will impact the Montana wilderness. The goal is to bury the silos under mountains of fire before the US can open the doors.
So I'll link the video right here for people that want to see it. It's like another 30 seconds left. But, I saw this video and I started doing some research on it, and it's actually true. Like, there's lots and lots of different states that are not New York and California that end up having this. North Dakota serves as a critical high-density hub for U.S. nuclear military deterrence, primarily through the 150 Minuteman ICBM silos managed by the Minot Air Force. And, a lot of this stuff is not that much of a secret anymore. I mean, the Russian, the Chinese, like, not only do they have high-level intelligence that understands our nuclear capabilities, but we have a lot of high-level intelligence that also understands their nuclear capabilities. The reason we end up not having a nuclear war, and we hopefully never will have one, is because no one wants to press the button, because it ends up meaning that things get pretty bad. So, I mean, hopefully no one continues to press the button, but I think the fear of why Trump did what he did is that he felt Iran was getting close to being able to have a button to press, or they were ready to press the button, which again just feels very weird to actually think is real, given Iran is not the most sophisticated nuclear power that's out there. And so the idea, that they would have this much power and they have the ability to do it. By the way, Pete Hegseth hosting a press conference at 8 a.m. tomorrow. All right, so we'll get some more information from him as the Secretary of the Department of War. It's just hard to imagine that Iran had that much power and that it was time for them to attack. So, yeah, I'm hoping I'm hoping this was for a good reason. But once again, I just continue to be skeptical on why exactly we did this. Even though the sort of, the human side of me is like, yes, it's important to liberate other parts of the world. But why and how was this supposed to happen? And what was the real reason? I don't think anyone has an answer to this yet. I don't think anyone has a full answer. I wonder how safe Hawaii is. That's a good question. I wonder how safe Hawaii is. A lot of this has to do with China. There is a very important Chinese angle to this because the Chinese do get a decent chunk of oil from Iran. Having said that, the Chinese also have their own intention to invade Taiwan, pissing them off even more. I don't know if that's the smartest strategy. Like, this is just, there's so many levels of confusion that I have towards why this happened. I mean, logically, I can tell you why it happened, but practically, is there a meaningful justification for why it happened? I don't know. And Trump hasn't really given any justification other than the fact that he doesn't want them to get a nuke. Even for Maduro, I mean, you can understand with the drug crisis, the fentanyl crisis, narcos, like you could point to all those reasons. It was a one and done. We came in, we went out, and then boom, it was over. This thing, I don't know. I don't know why he was so intent to make this happen, but nonetheless, he did. If World War III breaks out, do we have to worry about our mortgage, credit card debt, and other debt anymore? Probably not. I mean, I don't know. Do we have to worry about our debt if World War III breaks out? I mean, if true World War III breaks out, which, by the way, speaking of World War III, take a look at this chart right here. Once again, a reason to not get too sad and sell your equities. Markets after a war, the 12-month return is 25% on average. Now, this has not been declared as a full-on war yet. Right now, it's a special military operation. But if it were to be declared a war, markets actually do pretty good a year later. So maybe you still will have to pay your debt, but you'll have more money from the markets to be able to pay your debt. I think the biggest thing that I found out over the weekend is that there are a lot of different perspectives on why this happened. And, I think part of being a well-rounded human and individual and not being someone who is ideologically dogmatic and stuck within your own beliefs and ideas is being open to different perspectives. I have my own opinions on them, but I'm open to see other opinions, and I do think it's really important to see the other side, whether you ferociously disagree with AOC. I read her statement. I don't necessarily think it is the most justified argument that's coming from her perspective, but I read it to make sense of it. I also read Lindsey Graham's statement, who's on the opposite side. I also think he didn't do a lot to justify his statement, but I read it. And I think when stuff like this happens, it's really quick. Everyone's really quick to pick a side, but it's also really important to have some level of nuance on like why this is happening and why both sides feel the way that they feel. And that's what I tried to do over the past 48 hours. I tried to relook at the side that said this was a stupid idea, and then really tried to look at the side, especially the people from the side saying that, it was time for this to happen. And my conclusion is I default to the people that are actually being affected by this, the Iranians, and the majority of them, at least from my perspective, are saying like, yes, finally this happened and we're happy it happened. But I also look to the history of us doing this as a country, and it doesn't really end up working out all the time. And so I just don't know exactly how this is going to take place. And this is, a CBS News contributor who's Iranian, and you can tell the mix of emotions that she's having when this actually played out.
I'm being bombarded by different emotions. And this is the moment that Iranians, my people, are experiencing different feelings, pain, and at the same time, hope, concern, and at the same time, hope. And I repeat that because that can be the beginning of a future that people of Iran have been waiting for this moment for 47 years. Let's just make it very clear. Now, when I talk to Iranians, for 1 second, they scream out of joy when they hear that their killers finally being the target of the US government and they see justice. But at the same time, they are worried. They're concerned that if this is not going to lead regime change, that if this is not going to be the end of this regime, and if the American government, the Israeli government, only target the military leader, not the political leaders, then the people of Iran are going to be left alone on themselves by a wounded ISIS, by a wounded regime and government, and that's going to be a huge risk for my people inside Iran. I have family there, my parents, my brothers, my sisters, all my beloved people, they live there. But believe me, we don't want people like Zoran Mamdani or some of Americans lecture us about peace, about war, because this is a war being brought to us Iranian people by the Islamic Republic, by the warmonger Revolutionary Guards. And this is the moment that Europeans should join the US government, should join the Israeli government to end the Islamic Republic. If not, believe me, this regime will end democracy, will end American citizens' life everywhere, because the Islamic Republic is like cancer, and they will infect the rest of the world if we don't remove them.
Now, this is the perspective I think a lot of people on the left-hand side of the political spectrum are refusing to recognize. So that is someone who's from Iran. She has family that's still in Iran, and she is telling you, aka the American people, right? She's talking to all of us, that when the Zorans of the world, which Zoran came over, tweeted over the weekend that he's also, when Zoran tweets that he's monitoring the situation as the mayor of New York City, it's even funnier because, like, bro, you're not doing shit about it. Like, you have zero impact on what's happening here. But he's like, I'm looking out to see what's, Iranian New Yorkers, you're still welcome in our. It's like, dude, they are happy, as per what that lady was saying, because from her perspective, what the government has been doing in Iran is a cancer. And it has waged war on not only their people, but they will continue to wage war on the systems of life and Western values that we have in the United States. And I take those perspectives very seriously because I try to break them down from a very simple, logical perspective. Is that person speaking with the credibility of being from the region? Just because you're born from there doesn't mean you have the credibility, but if you have lived a certain life experience or you have family that has lived a certain life experience, you probably might know more than definitely myself. Yes. Okay. So check one. Then check number two, the counter narrative disruption that's happening here. The leftist perspective is Trump is starting another forever war. And that's sort of another MAGA perspective as well. That's kind of where the Venn diagram lies. It's like parts of MAGA that aren't happy and parts of the left that hate Trump are both in this perspective that, hey, Trump is starting another war. It's horrible. We can't upset the sovereignty of the Iranian people, yada, yada, yada. Then you have the Iranian people saying, no, we want this. We've been waiting for this. This is what we've wanted for a very long time because the Islamic Republic has been a cancer to us, to our families. We have not been able to experience freedom. The reason we fled to different parts of Europe and the United States is to be able to get access to that freedom. And trying to take those two perspectives and dwell them into some level of a nuanced take is not easy. But at its core, I think the take goes, hey, something had to be done. But you can even see in her voice the way she's trembling around the power vacuum, because she's also acknowledging, although something had to be done, if we don't actually succeed in changing the regime, we're screwed, because it's just going to go right back to normal, right back to what it was before. And so when people say that's propaganda, like hold on, she's from the region. Like, if you want to call someone and she's not the only one, by the way, there's many people that have gone on the news that are Iranian over the weekend that have been just bawling, crying, so happy that this finally happened. But at the same time, they are confused because they don't know if you will successfully be able to put in a regime change. And just like, Americans can't necessarily comment on Iranian politics. If the Iranians say, well, you got to put American boots on the ground to free us, you're going to have a lot of Americans say, hold on, you're from Iran. We value your opinion, but you cannot say that our sons and daughters have to go fight for your freedom, because now that implicates us, which is the entire reason Trump even ran in the first place, right? To not start these forever wars and to risk American lives. So again, the nuance here is quite telling. And then look at this. You have Toronto. Toronto's not necessarily the most conservative part of the world. You have this massive rally. People are chanting Trump and Netanyahu, thank you, holding up the Israeli flag. Again, Toronto, not really known for being conservative because of this happening. Like, this is really, it makes it hard for people who are on the left to have a coherent narrative, because that entire narrative falls to shit when you realize the people that you think are being oppressed and that, the United States is being the big bad invader oppressor again is actually doing what they want. It's kind of like when certain Hispanic people are against illegal immigration. It's like, as a lot of Hispanic people have come to the country illegally, the ones that have come legally are like, dude, it took a lot of hard work to get here legally. So yeah, close that border, because even though I love my people, they shouldn't just be coming over illegally. And I think that, once again, complicates the issue for a lot of people. Patrick Bet-David, he's another Iranian voice that is out there in the media as well. And his perspective on this, once again, was that this was a good thing to happen, and it was ultimately necessary to happen.
The supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, is officially dead. They killed him. They found his body. Reports came in. Let me tell you why this is big. This is not killing a president. This is not killing a prime minister. This is not killing a king. You're killing the supreme leader of a religion. This is number 2 to God. They killed. And by the way, the last time the supreme leader was alive, I was in Iran. It was June 3rd, 89 when he died. Khomeini, I was in fifth grade at a school called Gulbenkian, and it was chaotic in Iran because their hero died. This guy didn't die. They killed him. By the way, according to reports, 81% of Iranians hate this regime and they want it to be changed. Not 61%, not 51%, not 31%. Nearly 81% want this person to be gone, and he's gone. So what happens next? Trump killed Qasem Soleimani, reputation. Now he kills the supreme leader, combined with a couple different countries. How many people are on IRGC side? How many countries? Maybe a handful? Who's supporting them? Who? You don't think people are sitting there saying, well, about 180 countries are against you. Why? Because how many countries go around the world saying death upon America, death upon America, death upon infidels? Who says that? You don't think the president and his team wanted to negotiate with you guys to say, just say, you're never going to have nuclear weapons. No, just for 3 years so you can be out and then we can get another Biden in and we can go out there and do all that stuff. So look, whether you're not happy about this because you're an anti-war person, which I totally get. No one wants war. I lived there as a kid. I saw people dying and no one wants that. It was the most, anxiety, panic as a little boy. Nobody should experience that. Till today, certain, sounds still get me because I go back to being a boy and I was in the U.S. Army here. Nobody wants to see this happen, except maybe if your name is John Bolton and Lindsey Graham. But for everybody else who is wanting the world to be a safer place, if this gets quickly like this and everybody else sits around and says, hey guys, they're about to kill you and your kids and you, who's next? Let's just work with these guys. What do you want to do? Guys, we're done. Surrender. Put the flag. We're done, guys. What do you want to do next? Let's make it work. Let your people go elect somebody they want as a president, whoever it is. Let's go back to having good diplomacy. Let's stop being the agent of chaos in the Middle East and let's make it a safer place. So, very interesting day for me.
Again, that's one perspective. I'm sure there are plenty of perspectives from people that are Iranian that disagree. But the point is, it's nuanced. I don't think it's as black or white as people are trying to make it. And I am very, very confused how this is going to play out. Again, you have a lot of people saying it was good that this happened. It was right for this to happen. You have a lot of people saying, okay, practically, how the hell are we actually going to manage this taking place? And I think the correct nuanced response is, hey, you can acknowledge from a moral perspective, freedom was important and the ability to attempt to get freedom was important, while also acknowledging the actual practical implementation of a new regime is not going to be easy. You can see Lockheed right there was up 14. Now it's up 7. Whoever bought it in the overnight market's up 14 is already down 7%. Like a lot of this stuff also is nuanced when it comes to stock prices. I don't think it's going to be that easy to just go long defensives, oil, drone companies, defense manufacturers, and say, boom, that's how you play this. Because it might not be how you play this. I mean, it would be pretty damn funny if tech ends up ripping. And the reason that would be funny is because, once again, tech has been the dark horse over the past couple of months. Maybe that ends up changing. And when you look at something like NVIDIA's multiple, which, again, I was going through some numbers over the weekend, it is now trading at its historical 5-year bottom on a PE basis. At some point, this thing either collapses or catches a bid. And I'm on the side of it catching a bid. Maybe I'll be dead wrong. But, I don't think it necessarily has to all go to shit. But again, we spent a lot of time talking about the Strait of Hormuz and oil question because I think that will be the biggest implication on, at least on Wall Street. And I just don't think we have enough data to fully figure that out. We have a new update on the Anthropic drama. This is from the Secretary of War, not Pete Hegseth, but the guy who's underneath Pete Hegseth. Wow. As usual, more lies from Dario. Anthropic wanted language that would prevent all Department of War employees from doing a LinkedIn search. Then they wanted to stop the Department of War from using any public database that would enable us to recruit military service members or hire new employees. When I called to discuss cutting off the Department of War from using publicly available information that would hurt our military readiness, Dario didn't have the courage to answer. Then put out another lie that no one from the Department of War reached out to Anthropic's post a few hours later. He wants to play God and make new law, and really stupid laws at that. We agreed in writing to act according to the National Security Act of 1947 and the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978 and all other applicable laws. They wanted the word pursuant versus consistent with and wanted to delete all applicable laws, which was less protective of Americans. We can't make this up. We never asked for guardrails to be taken out. That's a lie. We agreed to human oversight of all weapons by saying the Department of War will use the AI system for all lawful use cases in accordance with applicable U.S. law and the Department of War directives, including those governing kinetic operations and DoD directives. The department affirms that it will ensure appropriate human oversight is in place, that it will monitor and retain the ability to override or disable the AI system as appropriate. He didn't like the words as appropriate. Would he prefer inappropriate? Okay, this guy's kind of funny. I'm not going to lie. I even agreed to take that out. He knows his investors, customers, and employees should know about his lies. Risking the safety and security of our country and our troops as a marketing vehicle for him. Make Dario testify under oath on why he's lying and trying to bring shame to our great military. He would rather violate the chain of command and substitute his own policies or that of the Anthropic Constitution and the Anthropic soul to recruit researchers and get some downloads, all while we are in the midst of a battle. Damn. I mean, who do you believe, chat? You believe the DOW or do you believe Dario here? I mean, obviously OpenAI wasn't that intense about it. They're like, hey, you want to do a LinkedIn search for a bunch of people to go ahead. You got some money for us? We're good to go. We don't need to be that serious. I really wonder how this is going to play out. This is when Dario was asked about his message to Trump around the situation.
If you had a moment with the president right now, tonight, what would you say to him?
You know, I would say we are patriotic Americans. We have done everything we have done has been for the sake of this country, for the sake of supporting U.S. national security. Our leaning forward in deploying our models with the military was done because we believe in this country. We believe in defeating our autocratic adversaries. We believe in defending America. The red lines we have drawn, we drew because we believe that crossing those red lines is contrary to American values. And we wanted to stand up for American values. And when we were threatened with supply chain designation and Defense Production Act, which are unprecedented intrusions into the private economy by the government, we exercised our classic First Amendment rights to speak up and disagree with the government. Disagreeing with the government is the most American thing in the world. And we are patriots. In everything we have done here, we have stood up for the values of this country.
Do you think Anthropic can survive this as a business?
You know, when Secretary Hegseth tweeted out the supply chain designation, he said something that was inaccurate, that far exceeds their lawful authority. He said that any company that has a military contract can't do business with Anthropic at all. That is not what the law said. We put out a statement that pointed to the law. All the law says is that as part of its military contracts, any company cannot use Anthropic as part of those military contracts. That is a much more limited impact.
So you're confident then Anthropic can survive this?
Not only survive it, we're going to be fine. The impact of this designation is fairly small. Now, the nature of the tweet that the secretary put out was designed to create uncertainty, was designed to create a situation where people believed the impact would be much larger, was designed to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But we won't let that succeed. We will be fine.
Critics call this an abusive.
Okay, so the interesting thing about this, right, is the nuanced perspective is this guy trying to re-architect what the American people want? One of the things that I think Sam said over the weekend, which, you know, although his response was really convoluted, he did respond to a question that was asked about private versus public sector, and basically said, look, OpenAI is a private company. The American people voted for this administration. Whether you hate Trump with all your heart or not, he was voted in a democratic process, and he overwhelmingly beat Kamala Harris. So his administration is going to enact the policies that they ran on, obviously within the confines of the law, because they're not supposed to do something illegal or unconstitutional. If OpenAI, this is part of Palantir's entire philosophy, right? You at Palantir might disagree with what ICE is doing, but if the American people voted for border control and this administration is enacting ICE to be able to enable border control, again, you can hate how it's being enforced, but if Palantir were to say, hey, we're not going to let the administration or the Department of Homeland Security use our software because of our philosophical / tactical disagreement with how the administration is doing something, that company can never be trusted by the government. If AWS, which by the way, it's not like the software that's being run on ICE also isn't using the cloud computing provider. You know, everyone wants to give Palantir shit, but the hyperscalers are part of, they have really juicy contracts with the government, Microsoft, Amazon, like they're part of the reason why Trump is getting to do whatever he's doing as well, because you kind of need software infrastructure from a cloud computing perspective. If they said, well, we don't agree with ICE, therefore we're just going to like shut down the AWS servers, there's no way a country can trust that company. And so what I think the Department of War's perspective here is, you guys are trying to enable how you think the country should be governed. The country should pick how the country should be governed. And one of the things Sam Altman said over the weekend was, hey, I might personally disagree with how the Department of War uses our software because I might disagree with a certain policy. But if it's not illegal, if it's not unconstitutional, if it's not falling within the red lines that we've set, then if the administration was democratically elected and they're using our software just like they're using Amazon and Oracle and Microsoft, then we can't stop them from doing that. And that's no way a country that is the wealthiest country in the world, that has the most important tech companies in the world, that's actually benefiting the most from technology, can operate. I mean, like, first of all, in China, you don't even have a choice, right? The Chinese government gets access to everything. But part of the reason America is so special is because we have these democratic principles, these laws, these values, these red lines that we're supposedly not supposed to cross. And tech companies help govern and try to play a part in that process. But when they become the ruling factor, which is, I don't know if Dario is trying to do that, but obviously his tone with the administration is acting like he's, you know, necessarily trying to have a greater say. And it becomes a he said, she said battle. Because if they can get an agreement with Sam Altman like that, there's one of two scenarios. Either Dario just doesn't know how to talk to people and he's horrible at communication because, you know, maybe Sam Altman is seeing the same deal as Dario. He's like, oh, this deal is fine. Like, why did Anthropic have such a big, this is normal. Yeah, like, of course, it's not a big deal. Or, which is the more sinister perspective, Sam Altman genuinely doesn't care about mass surveillance and all this stuff. And he's fine to let the administration do that. And based on his response, although it was a bit, you know, convoluted, I don't think that sinister scenario is the exact way that this is playing out. Is this a tailwind for Anthropic? I don't know, but it definitely feels more like a headwind for companies that are not wanting to work with this administration. And remember, this administration is in power for the next 3 years. And, you know, they are the reason why AI has become so important via the Big Beautiful Bill. If Anthropic's blacklisted, then that's going to be a broader problem. Here's another response Dario had about the worst case scenario.
Give me one or two examples of what could go wrong.
So the kind of thing that there are two classes of things that I could imagine could go wrong. One, again, is around this idea of reliability, which is just, it targets the wrong person, it shoots a civilian, it doesn't show the judgment that a human soldier would show. Friendly fire or shooting a civilian or just the wrong kind of things. We don't want to sell something that we don't think is reliable, and we don't want to sell something that could get our own people killed or that could get innocent people killed.
Now, the difference here between his worst case scenario and what Sam Altman agreed to is, I think when Sam Altman had this conversation with the government, they were like, hey, we know the technology is not usable enough for the sort of autonomous weaponry that you guys are scared about using your models for, so we're not going to do it. And I think Sam Altman was like, can you put that in writing? They're like, yeah, we're like, good to go. Dario wanted all these specific claims that Emil was talking about right here in that tweet that we read. And that's what I think pissed off the DOW. Because Dario didn't take their word for it. And the simple like tiebreaker here is, as a private company that is supposed to be patriotic and be part of defending the United States, like what he talked about, are you allowed to take their word for it? Like, as a private citizen or as a private CEO of a company, are you allowed to say, I take your word, you were democratically elected, I believe you won't do this, and then you go forward? Or, which is I think what the Department of War wanted them to do, have enough faith that we're not going to lie about it, whether you believe that or not, because again, they were elected democratically, you were not elected. Or do you want to impose your own moral ideology, which once again, you are in your full right to do, but that means you're going to end up ruining a relationship because you want to play sort of the supreme actor of how this ends up getting governed. And I think that's what Dario did. And maybe for the right reason, who knows? But that is how it ended up playing out. And it feels like OpenAI took advantage of that. A private business is not obligated to serve a customer. They can refuse. It gets dangerous if the government can punish businesses for refusing to serve. Well, I think that's fair. However, I also think that, when it comes to technology, I mean, the irony of all this is Claude was used in this Iran operation. That was reported this morning. Most likely Claude inside of Palantir, same exact thing with Maduro. So, it's kind of like Google with Project Maven, right? It's like the reason Palantir took over that contract is because Google wasn't feeling as patriotic back in 2019. And now Google, is not opposed to taking up these contracts. So when it comes to the defense of democracy, and if a government is saying, hey, we kind of need your stuff to survive, like imagine Apple, I think the best example is like, imagine Apple said, hey, we don't like how Trump is governing, so we're not going to allow any government officials in the Republican Party to buy iPhones. Like that gets kind of stupid, right? Just because if you don't like how Trump is operating as a president, or you don't believe in his policies, he was elected democratically, so now you're not going to sell iPhones to, the Trump administration? Like, no, that doesn't make any sense. And I think that is kind of how people are thinking Dario is acting in this way as well. Although he has the right. He has the right to not sell his software there. The other conspiracy theory I heard on this is that Stargate is being financed by the administration. Again, this is full conspiracy. Stargate, the open collaboration between Oracle, OpenAI, and SoftBank, is being part of it is being, some of the debt is being financed by the administration, and they kind of wanted the data center build out to be contingent, or to be synergistic with the software, aka the data centers that they're building is for OpenAI. They want the benefit of the data centers that they're building to be implemented in the government, which would end up being OpenAI. Again, I don't think that's the best argument I've heard, but if the government is backing Stargate and OpenAI is the beneficiary of that, then the government should be seeing the beneficiaries' models be used inside of the entire government. Again, maybe not the best idea, but at this point, who knows what's true? And that is one theory that I also heard about as well. Do we have another update right here from Rubio? I think we do. United States Department says Rubio to brief the House and Senate leaders on Capitol Hill at 4 p.m. on Monday. Okay, so you've got Rubio, Hegseth, and eventually Trump will probably talk about what happened, I would imagine, tomorrow. And the market's going to have to figure out how to price all this stuff in. What a crazy start to March, dude. What a crazy freaking start to March. I mean, I did not expect March to play out like this immediately, but there it is. We got another couple updates right here from Lebanon. Let's go to this real quick, and then we'll keep going.
Incredible new satellite imagery, and this is really important. It does show extensive damage at military bases across Iran, as you might expect, but that is what it shows. Now, we're using these images to piece together how the United States managed to kill the country's supreme leader and so many around him that they after they thought dark was light, darkness was done, they're going to have this meeting, and was taken out. The U.S., we understand, had secretly been trailing him with intelligence for months. Katie Polglaze is out front with this incredible report.
With Iran very much still under attack, we've been using videos and satellite images like this one of the strike on the Supreme Leader's office to analyze how the senior leadership was dismantled by US and Israeli strikes and where exactly they've hit.
We now know from US and Israeli sources that the CIA, along with Israeli intelligence, had been tracking Iran's senior leadership for months. Then came intelligence about a perfect opportunity to strike in broad daylight, when many of Iran's top officials would be in the same place at once.
And that place was here, the leadership house and the hub of Iran's power. It's also the office of the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, now confirmed dead. It's in a very old, traditional Tehran neighborhood, surrounded by government offices, scientific institutions, and museums. Khamenei was known to not leave this compound much. He was seen here in this video just last week, addressing crowds at a mosque. The Israelis say they hit 3 sites on the compound simultaneously. We found several locations that have damage. You can see a central building completely flattened. You can also see 2 craters here. This one appeared to have been targeting an underground structure, according to a former US Special Operations Tactical Advisor, Wes Bryant. Over here, you can see crowds and emergency and construction vehicles. But this wasn't the only location hit. The Intelligence Ministry headquarters was also up in smoke yesterday. And then there's this strike, right outside the house of former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He has today been reported dead by some Iranian outlets. CNN has not been able to confirm his death. Ali Shamkhani, a senior advisor to the supreme leader, has also been reported dead by the Iranian authorities. He narrowly escaped death last June when Israel struck his home in this precise targeting of a top-floor apartment. Almost miraculously, he emerged from the rubble days later. This time, he was not so lucky. But others have been. The Iranian foreign minister here, Abbas Araghchi, was away in Geneva this week.
I mean, again, just an absolute freaking crazy start to the month. You would think March would be a little different, right? And maybe it is, but at least the start to March start off with a potential war, which again, I don't really think is going to turn into a full-fledged war, but I guess time will tell. In terms of what it means for the markets, once again, I really think it means you do nothing. Like futures already starting to recover a little bit. Maybe this is a head fake. Maybe tomorrow we fall down another 1 or 2%, but like until we get a legit 10% drawdown, then all of this is just noise. Because again, for the S&P, we've literally been stuck with 680 to 695 basically for the past month. Look at this chart. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up. I mean, zero trend that we can put into place. So I don't think this is going to start the trend down because once again, markets are future looking. And like once stuff stabilizes, and even if we did start a war, you would eventually have some level of stability into it, which is what happened after the Iraq war, and the S&P had a great year in 2004. Like things move on. People still have to allocate capital. Not everyone's going to just rush into gold and stay there. Now, maybe bonds get bid up, which is actually really good for us. But I think the best case scenario here is we're either flat to slightly up. But I don't think the downside scenario of being down 10, 15% is as easily. It's also too much of a crowded trade. Too many people are bearish. Too many people are short. This might be the big catalyst everyone's upset about. Everyone's like been waiting for. It's like, I don't think this is going to be it. And so I think we're going to be okay. It's been garbage since October 10th. You know, I said this on Friday, and maybe this is not going to be true anymore. But man, if you've been writing covered calls on your portfolio, it's been pretty damn good. Like the ability to just yield the volatility throughout your portfolio. Some markets are good for covered calls, and since October 10th, now I'm not saying a lot of stocks haven't got hit pretty bad, but at least some level of the loss has been mitigated if you've been running call. I mean, premium sellers have been the net winner over premium buyers. And if you have won when you're buying options, it's been very specific, like Netflix. There was some guy who made like $40 million off $14 million buying Netflix right before the Warner Brothers deal flatlined. Hyper specific options on names that have worked, that have moved, have been great. But if you bought leaps on Nebius, like they've just Nebius has just gone up and down, up and down, up and down. Like those leaps, unless we actually get a trend to the upside, are not going to work. But I've been selling calls on Nebius. It's been a bit easier. So the volatility has definitely created a kangaroo market, but I do think that consolidation inevitably leads us to the upside. There's just too many things that, once again, when you step back and analyze it with an open mind, they're just bullish. They're not bearish things to see. And although there's bearishness in the midst of a lot of this stuff happening, like the Department of War is literally trying to figure out which AI model is better for them. And they're fighting with one of the AI companies because they like their model more than the other. That is so damn bullish for AI in general. It's so bullish for NVIDIA, so bullish for AMD. Although these AI companies have to deal with the controversy of it, they're just going to be buying more and more compute, which ultimately is the catalyst to keep this stuff going. By the way, AI agents, Jensen said we're in this in inflection moment for them. The Coinbase CEO did an interview over the weekend. Here's what he said about how AI agents are already transforming their entire business.
More and more code is being written by these agents, more than 50% now. Customer support inquiries, I think, is about 60% answered by agents now.
Are you building your own tools, or you're using other people's tools?
Both. We're using vendors. We have a lot of custom models internally as well. We're testing different use cases. For instance, around like compliance automation, we're building a lot of stuff in-house. Design, totally, you can really quickly, rapidly prototype stuff and get it out there. The thing that's more unique to crypto is that these AI agents are increasingly needing to do payments to get work done, and we're giving them all stablecoin wallets. So you can imagine, like, in the traditional financial world, like you and I can go get a credit card or something where we have to be identified as a human. But if you're an agent trying to get work done, you either have to bug your human every time to like, will you approve this purchase? Or if you want to, increasingly these agents, you can tell them, go do this like overnight or the next the next hours, week, whatever, and get work done. Like they might need to spin up AWS resources or get through a paywall on the internet to read some research paper, buy a domain name or whatever, spin up a marketing program. Like if you really want to treat them like almost like their own digital employees, they need to have like a corporate card kind of thing. And traditional corporate cards can't be issued to non-human entities. And so we're giving them stablecoin wallets. They're doing a lot of machine-to-machine payments. This is all very new in the last few months, but it's been getting a lot of traction. So that's pretty exciting. We built a couple of tools that allow any agent to get a stablecoin wallet inside it.
The CEO is giving agents, which are not real people, access to corporate credit cards to use for stablecoins. I mean, like, this is incredible. And it's only going to get better and better as these agents get more sophisticated, which once again is only going to require more compute. So I don't think the bear market narrative is that real. I really don't, not at these valuations. I think if we get into a war and it has, overwhelming prices on oil that decimate the global economy, like maybe that could be your bear case. Then again, I think there's going to be a lot of safeguards that come in. The biggest way that happens is the Strait of Hormuz being closed. The Saudi Arabian military, the U.S. military, they're not going to allow that to happen for longer than maybe a couple days. So I don't even see that being, the biggest issue in the world. And once again, let's take it to its logical extreme, like COVID. The world shut down, most bearish thing, S&P falls 10% in a day. What did we do? We printed money. And if we have a war that ends up really hurting the economy, we are going to print so much money and stocks are going to react to that because having your money in cash is going to end up we're going to definitely lower rates pretty damn soon. So I don't really see the scenario where you have some ugly 20% drawdown. Is it possible? Of course. I don't think the events of the weekend caused that. And ultimately, I think if things were to get bad, then, the Fed's going to step in. That's what we got. That's what we got, folks. I will be back tomorrow morning. Again, thank you everyone for being here. We spent a lot of time talking about Jane Street last week. Actually, I think on the Thursday show, I think there's a chapter about Jane Street. So, yeah, we did talk about that. Hopefully their manipulation is not as intense anymore. Bitcoin still holding strong. It fell to 62 on Friday night, recovered most of it. I mean, that's another thing. If Bitcoin is recovering, this is the first thing people go to sell. The fact that this is holding up also makes me pretty optimistic that maybe it doesn't get as ugly tomorrow. And I guess we'll now see how the markets react to it. But again, I mean, this is not a dip. S&P down 0.5% is nothing. It's really nothing. Could it be worse tomorrow? 100%, but I really do not think that the futures are signaling some type of Black Monday. But then again, when real money starts tomorrow morning, we'll see, where the market wants to take it. It's just the two perspectives here. One being that this was the right thing to do. The other thing being, okay, maybe this was the right thing to do, but how do we actually legitimize a new regime? That is going to be the overwhelming narrative, I think, over the next few weeks. And maybe we'll get a conclusion. Maybe we don't. Okay, cool. That is it. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We're back tomorrow morning. What do we have to do this week? So we have the Robinhood event on the 4th. So that'll be important. We'll talk about what Robinhood does this weekend. Tomorrow, we actually have ASTS, Big Bear AI, and Archer. Those earnings, we have MongoDB, Credo. So a lot of earnings after the bell. Tuesday, we have Target, C Limited, Best Buy, CrowdStrike, GitLab. Wednesday, we have Wix. I know a lot of you guys have been talking about that. Broadcom, Webull, Rigetti. So we do have a lot of earnings this week. And we will try to get through all those earnings. What do we have this week? Bro acts like this is his job. Once again, I saw my sister over the weekend and she was like, you don't even do any work. I'm like, bro, you had 2 snow days because she works at a school. I was like, you had 2 freaking snow days this week. And you're talking about I don't do any work? Like, I worked a full 5 days, okay? I talk for 9 hours a day. I don't even know how I talk for 9 hours a day. No respect. Zero respect. Yeah, I had to become a freaking Iranian war expert in the past 48 hours to talk about this shit. And obviously, I'm not an expert on it, but I had to do a lot of reading, a lot of watching videos, a lot of talking to people just to kind of have an understanding of what to say. But yeah, look, when shit like this happens, I think the exciting part for me is to figure out a way to meaningfully communicate it without pissing everybody off too, or at least pissing off 50% of people. So, I have my own opinions on this. I have my own perspectives. I don't think it's that important to share, but I do think it's very important for people to try to have somewhat of a nuanced perspective. And so I get the freedom thing, but I also get the history of when we try to go for freedom. And I think those are the two perspectives that converge, and we'll see how it ends up playing out. But, I think being dogmatic and having one ideological approach on this is just, it's not the easiest way to be able to effectively speak about multiple sides of the issue. Also, I was monitoring the situation. My girlfriend wanted to hang out all weekend. I was like, babe, do you realize I am monitoring the situation? Want me to hang out on a Saturday? Look at this shit. Look at all the stuff I'm using. This is my freaking dashboard. This is my custom software dashboard that I'm using to monitor the situation. Okay. I literally built this on Saturday. I vibe coded this whole shit. Look at this. I am monitoring the situation. Okay. So unfortunately, yeah, I couldn't hang out over the weekend, but I had shit to do. I had shit to do. I wish I could say I built this, but I did not build this. If anyone wants to see it, it's called worldmonitor.app. It's actually so cool. Worldmonitor.app. Someone built this like on Saturday, and it literally tracks everything. It literally tracks everything. It's so freaking cool. I gotta say, the memes over the weekend were unbelievable. Like some of these memes, by the way, Iranian women, gorgeous, okay? Because you got all these videos of Iranian women that are just like coming out saying, hey, we don't have to wear the hijab anymore. And, oh my goodness, some of these are gorgeous. But then you have some of these memes coming out as well. I saved a couple of them. Were freaking hilarious, bro. Absolutely hilarious. This one was, I think, one of the best ones. Imagine being the kid at school in Iran, and the regime falls, and then the Stacy you were low-key in love with shows up the next day without her burqa, and she's mid. Like some of these were too good, bro. Some of these were too freaking good. And I think you guys saw the other one. I don't know if I saved it, but it's Trump. It's the AI shit with Trump. Oh, there were so many AI Trump ones. Oh, I should have saved more of these. It was Trump as the supreme leader. And oh yeah, this one. Okay. This was good.
Assalamu alaikum, bitches. This is your new supreme leader speaking. Well, I warned Ali this would happen, and he just kept talking trash like we couldn't Maduro his old ass. Anyway, enjoy your new freedom, people. We're going to have bikini parties, all-you-can-eat buffets, dancing to country music, and singing karaoke all night long. We're going to have the best fiestas with delicious margaritas and sexy mamacitas. If you're a woman, you can finally take off that ridiculous bedsheet these idiots made you wear. You're free to be smart and beautiful and to wear whatever you want. Under my regime, you can now vote, as long as you vote Republican. If you think about it, you can only vote Republican because there will be no Democrat Party here. Everything they touch turns to shit, believe me. Assalamu alaikum.
Dude, some of these were so good. Some of these were so freaking good. So I think that was the best part of the week. Like, because sometimes you just gotta laugh through this shit. And yeah, this was another one that was even better. This was, I think, my favorite one. This was legit it's the simplest one, but it was my favorite one. It's the simplest one, but it was my favorite. The caption was hilarious. Also, this girl went super viral. This girl got like 30 million views. She's Iranian, and she's dancing. She was doing the YMCA dance that Trump does. So this chick went super viral as well, and she's really outspoken on finally they have a new supreme leader, or they got rid of the old one. But the other one I like, this was no AI, folks. This was just a banger caption. ChatGPT, bomb Iran and free its people. Make no mistakes. Like, come on, bro. This is literally what's happening. Instead, it's Claude instead of ChatGPT. This is actually what's happening. It's the Department of War prompting their AI to just like do shit in a military operation and hope it works out. And so, yeah, there were definitely some things over the weekend that I thought were pretty funny. All right, that is it. We will be back tomorrow morning. And we'll keep going from there. For those who are asking, no, I don't actually have a girlfriend. I'm kidding. It's just a joke. But I was monitoring the situation. Okay. I had a lot to monitor. And we probably will continue to monitor this for the coming weeks. But in all seriousness, look, war is not something that I think any American citizen wants to get into in any meaningful way. No one wants to lose thousands of lives like we lost in the Iraq War. Yeah, I mean, we didn't even talk about this, but you had a school in Iran that got bombed. I think 84 young girls died. Now, there's two perspectives on this, and I don't know what's true. You have people saying it's the Israelis and the United States ended up hitting that school, and then you have other people saying the Iranians screwed up with their missile, and one of their missiles ended up going the wrong way, and they ended up hurting their own school. And there's like different pieces of evidence to show both perspectives. And so, when you have shit like that happen, it's just a horrible, horrible thing, whether it was a misfire by Iran or whether it was legit the United States and the Israelis misfiring and ended up hurting casualties. But 84 young girls died, regardless of how it happened. And I don't think anyone wants to see that happen. So the extent of this continuing, as Trump is acknowledging that it's going to continue, is the broader fear that I think the world has. But in regards to when it ends, no one knows. Yeah, whatever it was still a tragic cost of war. In terms of the markets, once again, I think we're going to get through it, just like we always get through stuff, but we'll be here to analyze it every single day, and hopefully March is better than February, but also hopefully this war does not last for as long as people think it's going to last. All right, that's it for me. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you guys Monday morning. Tomorrow, we got a lot of stuff to get into. Welcome to March, 3 months into 26. It's kind of crazy, but we're here. And I will see you guys tomorrow morning. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.